You wake up believing that staying consistent, staying honest, staying disciplined will be enough to win. But the world you move in does not reward those who stay predictable. It rewards the ones who shift shape, adjust angles, and stay ungrabbable. Every time you present a fixed identity, someone stronger, sharper, or more desperate learns how to strike you. Every time you say, "This is who I am," someone out there is already studying how to use that against you. There are two types of people moving through this century. The ones who cling to a stable form, hoping the world will stay gentle, and the ones who study how power bends, morphs, breaks, and reforms, and choose to bend with it. Today's principle is Law 48. From the 48 laws of power, assume formlessness. This is the mind that refuses to be boxed in, the presence that reveals nothing, the strategist who flows like water and hits like steel. It is the intelligence that lets you walk into chaos without losing direction. And before you think this is manipulation, understand this: the predators around you are already fluid. They are already shifting masks, studying weaknesses, testing boundaries. You deserve to know how to move without being trapped, how to protect your time, your goals, and your peace. This is not about deception. This is self-defense. Type in the comments, "I choose power over permission." Now, let me show you how the most dangerous minds in history used formlessness to rise, survive, and dominate, and how you can start using it today. The death of the fixed identity begins the moment you realize something uncomfortable about the world you are moving through. Every time you present a solid version of yourself, someone out there instantly begins shaping a strategy around that version. The moment you say, "This is how I respond," "This is what I believe," "This is what I always do," you hand someone a blueprint. And in a world driven by rapid shifts, digital surveillance, unpredictable competition, and constant interpretation, giving anyone a blueprint is giving them power over you. You become a target when you become predictable, not because you are weak, but because you are readable. Readable means manageable. Manageable means influenceable. And influenceable means bendable under pressure. Once someone can predict your reactions, they can also provoke them. Once they can provoke them, they can steer outcomes you never agreed to. That is why a rigid version of you becomes a weakness instead of a strength. Machiavelli warned that rulers who cling to one way of operating collapse when conditions change. The same principle applies to your identity. When you freeze yourself inside a past definition, you shrink your ability to navigate the present. You walk into new situations using old tools. You speak to modern threats with outdated patterns. You respond to emerging challenges with stale instincts. Meanwhile, those who study movement, fluidity, and shifting conditions glide past you because they refuse to lock themselves into a single version of who they are. The psychological weight of a fixed identity is subtle but dangerous. You begin to defend that identity even when it no longer serves you. You cling to habits because they feel familiar. You protect labels that once gave you confidence but now limit your growth. You stay loyal to outdated beliefs because changing them feels like betrayal instead of evolution. And while you hold on, other players adapt. They expand. They learn, they morph, and you stay in a shape the world already knows how to attack. In modern life, the people who stay rigid are the easiest to manipulate. Maybe you have met someone who always reacts with anger. All it takes is a small push to set them off, and suddenly the entire room knows how to control them. Maybe you know someone who always wants approval. Place them near the right voice, and they fold. Maybe you have faced someone who labels themselves as loyal, patient, kind, or fearless. That sounds admirable, but once they announce it, every opponent studies how to use it. The rigid identity becomes a handle, and handles help others move you where they want you to go. The path of formlessness begins when you strip away those handles. You stop broadcasting rigid qualities. You move from a place of quiet self-awareness instead of public self-definition. You choose actions that match the situation, not actions that match a stale idea of yourself. You shift your tone depending on the environment. You shift your strategy depending on the goal. You shift your posture depending on the energy around you, not to deceive, but to remain free. Your power grows when you stop being easy to predict. People stop assuming they can read you. They stop expecting the same reaction. They stop believing they know how to reach your weaknesses. Without fixed labels, you start operating from a deeper center. Decisions become cleaner because they are not tied to old identities. Relationships become healthier because you no longer force yourself into outdated roles. Conflicts become easier to navigate because your opponents cannot rely on familiar patterns. Every interaction becomes a space where you can respond without being trapped by yesterday's version of yourself. The death of the fixed identity is the birth of strategic freedom. You are no longer the person the world expects. You are the person the moment requires. And when you move like that, no rival can lock you down. No manipulator can cage you, and no situation can intimidate you. You are not abandoning who you are. You are evolving who you can become. Emotional fluidity is the invisible shield that protects you long before conflict reaches your doorstep. You have seen how easily people with rigid emotional patterns get dragged, provoked, or cornered. Someone knows they get loud when challenged, so they push them. Someone knows they panic when silence hits, so they apply silence. Someone knows they chase approval, so they withhold it. The moment your emotional reactions become predictable, you become a puppet in someone else's hands. Emotional formlessness breaks that chain. You stop giving outsiders a clear way to trigger you. You stop broadcasting weaknesses disguised as habits. You stop allowing others to steer your mind through predictable impulses. Machiavelli warned that those who cannot control their emotional states eventually lose control of their kingdoms. In modern life, your kingdom is your attention, your energy, your focus, your boundaries. Once someone else can steer any of those through emotional manipulation, you are no longer living by your own design. Emotional fluidity returns authority back to you. This form of fluidity does not mean suppressing everything you feel. It means shaping your responses based on what protects you, not what satisfies an impulse. You learn to pause before reacting. You let silence stretch without fear. You allow yourself to respond softly even when pressured. You allow yourself to respond firmly, even when others expect softness. Calm unpredictability becomes a shield because it gives others nothing to grip. They cannot pull you toward anger, fear, guilt, or desperation if they cannot predict which emotional space you will move into. Watch what happens when you adopt emotional fluidity in daily life. An aggressive person tries to spark a reaction, expecting you to defend yourself loudly. Instead, you stay centered, speaking with a balanced tone that reveals nothing. Their tactic collapses. An insecure person attempts subtle guilt, expecting you to rush toward reassurance. Instead, you respond steadily without giving them the emotional leverage they wanted. Their pattern dissolves. A controlling person demands instant obedience through tension and pressure. Instead, you meet the moment with composed neutrality, refusing to feed their power loops. Their grip weakens. In each scenario, your power expands not because you fought harder, but because you refused to offer the emotional response they needed to maintain control. Emotional fluidity makes you unreadable, and unreadable people cannot be manipulated easily. Your presence becomes a mirror. Others reveal themselves while you reveal nothing. The psychological truth is simple. Most emotional manipulation relies on prediction. Manipulators do not have supernatural insight. They rely on patterns. If they know you argue when pushed, they push. If they know you please when rejected, they reject. If they know you crumble under silence, they go silent. Once you break the pattern, the entire manipulation system falls apart. Emotional fluidity also gives you something deeper, breathing space. When you stop reacting instantly, you start seeing clearly. You notice motives behind words. You notice the difference between genuine concern and disguised pressure. You notice the energy someone brings when they want something from you. You notice when a conversation is crafted to corner you rather than connect with you. Clarity grows in the spaces where old emotional patterns once lived. Another powerful aspect of emotional fluidity is the way it shifts your presence. People who once tried to dominate you begin adjusting their tone. People who once talked over you start watching your reactions. People who once used emotional waves to control you now face a calm surface with no handles. You become someone who cannot be moved without consent, and that makes others move more carefully around you. In the end, emotional fluidity does not make you cold, it makes you sovereign. You feel everything, but you do not let those feelings make your decisions for you. You sense every shift around you, but you decide how to respond, when to respond, and whether a response is even required. Your emotions stop being exposed nerves and become strategic signals. You gain the freedom to act with intention instead of reflex. Emotional fluidity is strategic armor because it protects your inner world from being accessed, manipulated, or weaponized. When you move with calm unpredictability, you break the chains that once pulled at your mind. You stand grounded, unreadable, and powerful in ways that silence every controlling voice around you. Mastering the environment through adaptability begins with accepting a fundamental truth about power. The world around you is never still. Everything shifts. Markets shift, relationships shift, alliances shift, opportunities expand and collapse within moments. Threats appear from places you never expected, while many cling to old habits in the hope that stability will return. Powerful players behave differently. They move with the world instead of resisting it. They sense shifts before others notice. They adjust faster than their rivals can plan, and because they adapt, they rise. People lose ground not because they lack intelligence, but because they cling to outdated ways of operating. An old strategy that once worked becomes a trap when conditions change. A familiar routine becomes a cage when everything around you evolves. The danger lies in believing that consistency equals strength. Machiavelli warned that leaders who refuse to adjust their methods fall the moment fortune changes its direction. Adaptability is not a talent. It is a discipline that separates those who survive from those who disappear. Look at how adaptability functions in real life. In a workplace, you might have seen someone who holds tight to a single skill, a single tactic, or a single way of communicating. They resist new systems, ignore new tools, and hope that the world bends back to them. But the world never bends. Instead, the adaptable worker learns faster, shifts approach, broadens skill sets, and reads unspoken changes in team dynamics. The adaptable worker sees the power structure behind the formal hierarchy. They understand who truly influences decisions. They understand when to speak and when silence carries more weight. As they adjust, they climb. Adaptability is not about abandoning your values. It is about adjusting your strategy to match the terrain. Think of a strategist stepping into different rooms. In one room, assertive clarity creates respect. In another, quiet observation wins control. In another, collaborative language builds trust. In another, distance protects your leverage. The adaptable player does not use the same tone everywhere. They shift energy to match the environment. They do not confuse sameness with authenticity. They understand that evolution is not deception, it is survival. Watch what happens when you begin to master the environment around you. You start noticing subtle indicators others ignore. Someone hesitates before answering, revealing tension. Someone gives an overly polished answer, revealing hidden intention. Someone pushes a new idea too aggressively, revealing personal agenda. Someone avoids responsibility with carefully chosen words, revealing insecurity. Adaptability allows you to move through these signals with flexibility. You adjust so quickly that the person attempting to influence you realizes they cannot anchor you. You cannot be boxed, cornered, or redirected because your mind does not sit in one fixed shape. Modern leaders thrive because they treat adaptability as constant recalibration. They track emotional climate, team dynamics, public sentiment, market evolution, and hidden tension with equal awareness. When a plan falters, they shift without hesitation. They do not waste energy mourning the old approach. They upgrade it. When a rival tries to predict their next move, they alter their pattern. When expectations tighten around them, they pivot towards something unexpected. This ability keeps them ahead, not through force, but through fluid movement. The psychology behind adaptability is simple but powerful. When you are flexible, you remove predictable paths. Rivals cannot anticipate your decisions. Manipulators cannot rely on old patterns. Rigid thinkers cannot decode your strength. Adaptability turns you into a moving target. A moving target is harder to control, harder to attack, harder to restrain, and as you continue to shift, you begin shaping the environment instead of merely reacting to it. Choices become intentional, actions become precise. Presence becomes a form of influence. This lesson is the turning point, where you realize that power is not about clinging to what once worked. Power is about adjusting faster than those around you can calculate. When you master adaptability, you become the strategist who sees openings long before others notice. You become the player who stays ahead because you refuse to stay still. You become the leader who grows stronger with every shift in the world because you no longer fear change. You use it. Silent recalibration is the art of shifting your internal axis without letting the outside world read the movement. It is the discipline of adjusting your direction, intentions, tone, and presence so quietly that people around you sense the difference long before they understand it. This is power in its purest form, invisible, unspoken, and impossible to track. When you move with controlled subtlety, you place yourself beyond the reach of those who depend on noise, confrontation, and attention to maintain influence. Your strength grows inside the spaces that others overlook. True recalibration begins within the mind. Instead of announcing your change through emotional display or dramatic gestures, you refine your thinking in private. You study patterns, behaviors, and motivations with a calm, steady gaze. You give yourself permission to evolve without permission from anyone. This internal shift is what makes the external shift inevitable. When your thoughts are aligned with your future rather than your past, your actions naturally follow. Yet those around you struggle to pinpoint the transition because you have revealed nothing directly. Your routines become tools for silent transformation. The way you wake, the way you communicate, the way you respond, and the way you withdraw, all begin to carry intentional weight. You trim unnecessary conversations, you reserve your energy, you remove yourself from predictable situations. Each adjustment is small enough to look harmless, but consistent enough to alter your entire trajectory. People sense that your presence is different, yet they cannot locate the exact moment where the difference began. This ambiguity protects you and strengthens you simultaneously. Your silence develops into a shield. While others argue, explain, justify, and announce their every decision, you allow your moves to unfold quietly. You no longer rush to react. You no longer feel compelled to defend. Your calmness becomes unsettling for those who depend on emotional disruption to gain leverage. When you choose silence instead of confrontation, you force others to reveal their intentions first. In that gap, you gather information, you examine reactions, you watch who becomes uncomfortable, defensive, or confused. Your silence exposes what their noise tries to hide. Silent recalibration also grants you the advantage of repositioning yourself without resistance. When people know your next step, they block it. When people hear your goals, they interfere or attach themselves to the outcome. But when you shift in silence, no one can sabotage what they cannot see. You navigate around obstacles before they appear. You restructure your opportunities before anyone realizes what you are building. You advance without competition because no one knows they should compete. In this quiet evolution, your authority starts to rise. Not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. People respond to the subtle strength of someone who is no longer influenced by noise. Your calm recalibration makes you look composed, intentional, and focused, even without words. Your energy signals that you no longer operate from reaction. You operate from choice. This is what turns presence into power, not volume, but direction. Through this lesson, you learn that silence is not emptiness. Silence is measurement. Silence is strategy. Silence is the pause where you decide what deserves your attention and what no longer has access to it. Silent recalibration allows you to shift your identity, strengthen your boundaries, refine your ambitions, and redirect your path without losing momentum. It creates distance from old versions of yourself and protection from those who benefit from your predictability. In a world obsessed with constant expression, your restraint becomes your advantage. While others try to dominate through noise, you rise through precision. You move gently but deliberately. You change quietly but permanently. And each silent adjustment becomes a step toward a stronger, more untouchable version of yourself, a version that commands respect without ever demanding it. Building multiple versions of yourself begins with a simple but uncomfortable truth. No single identity can survive every situation. The world constantly shifts. Alliances form and fracture. Opportunities appear and vanish. Opponents adapt. Relying on one fixed version of yourself leaves you exposed. The moment someone learns the limits of who you are, they gain leverage. Strategic reinvention solves this problem. It allows you to move through environments fluidly, shield yourself from sabotage, and remain ahead of rivals who are still relying on predictable patterns. To expand yourself effectively, you must think like a strategist, not a performer. This is not about deception. It is about flexibility. Each version of yourself corresponds to a context, a challenge, or a goal. In one scenario, you might emphasize analytical precision. In another, persuasive charisma. In another, quiet observation. Each version is authentic, but no single one defines your total capacity. By building multiple identities, you make it impossible for others to fully understand, predict, or contain you. Consider modern leaders who operate across industries. They adapt to public scrutiny, internal politics, and market unpredictability. They shift their communication style, approach to problem solving, and even personal habits depending on who they are interacting with and what they are trying to achieve. Their versatility creates layers of protection. Competitors who attempt to copy their moves fail because they can only see a single facet of a multifaceted presence. The original remains several steps ahead because they are not confined to one predictable identity. Psychologically, multiple versions of yourself make you less vulnerable to emotional and social manipulation. A person who depends on flattery, fear, or guilt to control you finds no single entry point. If you have developed the capacity to adjust your reactions, language, and energy, attempts to influence you collapse. Every social interaction becomes a testing ground where you discover which version fits and which keeps you safe. The more versions you cultivate, the more resilient your presence becomes. Building multiple selves also enhances growth. Each version requires developing new skills, perspectives, and alliances. You take lessons from one environment and translate them into another. The skills you acquire in negotiation can improve leadership. The adaptability you cultivate in conflict helps creativity. The alliances you form in one sphere may open doors elsewhere. Your identity becomes expansive, capable of navigating more opportunities than a fixed, singular self ever could. This strategy protects you from sabotage as well. Someone seeking to undermine a single version of you will fail when you can shift to another. They plan attacks based on assumptions. They miscalculate timing. They anticipate reactions that never occur. By cultivating multiple approaches, your presence becomes a moving target. Their efforts collapse quietly, leaving you unshaken and unexposed. The process requires awareness and discipline. You do not scatter your energy into chaos. Each version is deliberate. Each serves a purpose. You maintain a core self that guides these expressions, ensuring coherence amid diversity. Without this center, reinvention risks fragmentation and confusion. With it, reinvention becomes your shield, your tool, and your advantage. Finally, building multiple selves transforms how others perceive you. They see depth where others see surface. They sense adaptability where others see rigidity. They recognize authority without needing it announced. You become someone who can meet any scenario on equal footing or superior terms. Each version you create strengthens the others, reinforcing your influence, resilience, and strategic power. By mastering this lesson, you understand that true freedom comes from multiplicity. You are no longer confined to the limitations of a single pattern. You are not trapped by old roles or outdated reputations. Every interaction, challenge, and opportunity becomes a space where you can select the version of yourself that maximizes advantage, ensures safety, and maintains momentum toward your ultimate goals. The shape-shifting advantage in modern arenas begins with understanding that visibility and invisibility are tools, not limitations. 21st century winners do not rely solely on persistence, brute force, or loud presence. They move with fluidity, blending into environments when necessary, and asserting dominance when the moment demands. This is not theatrics or performance. It is strategic timing, awareness, and control. By learning to shift form, they manipulate perception without deception, creating opportunities while others remain fixed in predictable patterns. Business provides the clearest examples. Executives who dominate markets rarely stick to a single approach. One day they may retreat from public attention to observe competitors, analyze trends and refine strategy. The next day they strike with a product launch, merger or partnership that catches rivals off guard. In branding, successful entrepreneurs reinvent public perception continuously. They adjust messaging, update image, and pivot offerings to capture emerging audiences. They disappear from certain spaces only to reappear in others with amplified impact. The unpredictability keeps competitors, critics, and followers off balance. Negotiation thrives on shape-shifting as well. Rigid negotiators reveal patterns and can be cornered or manipulated. Fluid negotiators, however, change tactics, tone, and presence depending on the counterpart. One moment they are passive, observing weaknesses and listening for cues. The next, they assert authority decisively, exploiting gaps in understanding. Their ability to move between roles keeps discussions from becoming traps. The other party cannot anchor them to expectations or force concessions that their fluidity prevents. Unpredictability becomes leverage. Reputation in the digital age is another arena where shape-shifting dominates. Influencers, CEOs, and thought leaders who maintain strict, predictable personas are vulnerable to attacks, misinterpretations, or viral controversies. Those who shift identity subtly, balancing openness with discretion, maintain control over perception. They release information strategically, curate visibility, and manage online presence with a rhythm that obscures true intent. Disappearing from one conversation or platform can generate curiosity and anticipation, allowing them to return with amplified influence and authority. Psychologically, shape-shifting confounds rivals and observers alike. People expect consistency. When they encounter variation, they hesitate, overthink, and miscalculate. A competitor tries to predict your next move and fails. A collaborator attempts to influence your choices and cannot find a foothold. A public audience assumes they understand your motives and gets surprised when the reality diverges from expectation. Your fluidity transforms you into a dynamic presence that cannot be controlled, contained, or diminished. Shape-shifting also builds resilience. When one avenue closes, another opens without panic or compromise. Failure is absorbed because identity is not locked into a single outcome. Mistakes become feedback rather than traps. As you move between forms, you gain freedom to respond without attachment to any single result. The more skillfully you navigate transitions, the stronger your influence and presence become. This advantage demands observation, patience, and subtlety. Sudden, erratic changes without reason create confusion that harms your credibility. Successful shapeshifters calibrate movement carefully, balancing unpredictability with coherence. They understand which aspects of self to display, which to conceal, and when to reappear. They cultivate timing so that disappearance becomes power, not avoidance, and re-emergence becomes dominance, not chance. In modern arenas, those who master shapeshifting act like water flowing through channels, unseen yet unstoppable, flexible yet forceful, They vanish from immediate sight, only to appear where opportunity aligns. They manipulate perception without resorting to lies. They adjust energy, tone, and strategy to match each environment. The result is influence, authority, and momentum that rivals cannot touch. This is the core of modern power, the ability to disappear in one moment and dominate the next. Becoming untouchable is the ultimate stage of formlessness. It is the point where external forces lose the ability to define, control, or intimidate you. Everything around you may shift. Power struggles, market fluctuations, social pressures, personal attacks. Yet your center remains unshakable. Untouchability is not about aggression or dominance alone. It is about total mastery over self, presence, and perception. It is the evolution where strategy, discipline, and awareness converge, allowing you to operate freely while others remain confined by circumstance, expectation, or fear. True formlessness eliminates predictability. People can no longer anticipate your actions, responses, or motives. Attempts to corner, provoke, or manipulate you fail because you offer no fixed point to leverage. Every approach, every tactic, every interaction is met with calibrated flexibility. When someone expects compliance, you redirect with subtle authority. When someone expects chaos, you respond with measured control. When someone expects hesitation, you act decisively. This dynamic creates a psychological edge that cannot be contested because it exists outside conventional frameworks. Psychologically, untouchable individuals generate a quiet power that influences without coercion. Others unconsciously adjust to their presence, seeking alignment instead of confrontation. Rivals overextend themselves in attempts to predict or dominate, only to reveal weaknesses. Allies respect boundaries instinctively, because they sense the discipline behind every action. Untouchability turns influence into a natural consequence of being, rather than a product of performance. The more consistent your formless presence, the more impossible it becomes to manipulate, shame, or derail you. In modern arenas, untouchable players operate across business, politics, and social dynamics with minimal friction. They shift roles, strategies, and personas seamlessly. In negotiations, they retain control by offering no predictable path. In leadership, they inspire authority without demanding loyalty. In public life, they manage reputation with precision, choosing when to appear, when to withhold, and how to respond without revealing vulnerability. Their environment moves to accommodate their adaptability rather than the other way around. This state also amplifies decision-making without fear of external definitions or pressures. Every choice comes from clarity, not compulsion. Opportunities are seized with intention rather than reaction. Mistakes do not break you because they are analyzed without ego attachment. Obstacles are neutralized by strategy rather than brute force, and each interaction becomes a space to shape outcomes subtly, ensuring that your influence extends beyond immediate perception. Untouchability is reinforced through layers of preparation and reflection. Emotional discipline ensures that triggers do not disrupt focus. Situational awareness allows anticipatory responses rather than reactive ones. Continuous learning and skill expansion provide new tools for every environment. Alliances are cultivated with discretion, strengthening options without creating dependence. Presence, timing, and adaptability merge into an unassailable form of resilience that rivals cannot touch and manipulators cannot exploit. The final evolution also transforms how you are perceived. People sense strength without hostility, competence without arrogance, and freedom without detachment. They recognize that you are untethered from expectation, yet grounded in purpose. They understand that influence comes not from pressure, but from mastery. This perception itself becomes a protective force, as others hesitate to challenge someone who moves beyond control. In this state, you no longer operate in reaction to threats, praise, or circumstance. You move intentionally, respond with precision, and remain far ahead of any force attempting to limit you. Untouchable power is not about domination over others. It is domination over self and environment simultaneously. It is the pinnacle of formlessness, where nothing can trap, define, or intimidate you, and where every action flows from awareness, discipline, and strategy. You have explored 7 layers of Law 48 from the 48 Laws of Power. Each lesson was a step into a world most avoid, a world where predictability is weakness and fluidity is strength. But knowledge alone is not power. Understanding the lessons and seeing them on paper changes nothing if you continue to move like the old version of yourself. Awareness without application is a trap. It feels like preparation, but it is really stasis. You must act, you must shift. You must embody the principles you now understand. Your assignment is deliberate and precise. Do not attempt to master all 7 lessons at once. The human mind cannot integrate that much change at the same time, and the attempt often results in reverting to familiar habits. Pick one lesson. Choose the one that resonates most with your current challenge, the one that feels urgent in your daily life. Practice it for 7 days, consistently, not perfectly. Allow small cracks to appear in your old identity. Those cracks are openings for transformation. A single intentional shift is enough to break a pattern that has held you back for months or years. It is enough to awaken a new version of yourself, a version that moves with intention and foresight. Understand this clearly. Law 48 is not a license to deceive or harm the innocent. It is armor against those who already wield power without conscience. It is a shield that protects your time, your energy, and your mental clarity. It allows you to walk into rooms, meetings, or social spaces without being read like an open book. It gives you the discipline to grow, to evolve, and to elevate without waiting for anyone to approve your transformation. Protection, not predation, is the core principle. Your actions are defensive first, adaptive always, and precise by design. You face 2 distinct paths in life after learning these lessons. The first path is that of the manipulator, the person who uses formlessness to deceive, dominate, or control others. That path ultimately collapses because it builds fear, isolation, and instability. Instead of sustainable strength, the second path is that of strategic awareness. Here, you move with flexibility to ensure that no one can control, trap, or limit you. Your mastery is internal, and your freedom is external. You do not seek to dominate others. You seek to protect yourself and expand your influence intelligently. Starting tomorrow, which version of yourself will you cultivate? The version the world shaped, confined by expectation and routine, or the version you deliberately choose with awareness and strategy? Your evolution is not about noise or announcement. It is quiet, consistent, and powerful. Each step, each adjustment, each layer of formlessness reinforces your presence, shields your mind, and magnifies your ability to act with precision. The lessons you practice become instinctive. The cracks you created expand into paths for growth. The awareness you cultivate prevents manipulation. The discipline you build ensures resilience. Your influence becomes subtle but undeniable. Before you go, reinforce this practice. Hit like to ensure this message reaches someone who needs it. Subscribe and turn on notifications so that no lesson of power, strategy, and modern formlessness escapes you. Comment below which lesson impacted you most and why, because reflection anchors change. The path you choose is yours to own. Stay formless, stay disciplined, stay 10 steps ahead.